NAT stands for Network Address Translation. Although NAT can be used on any network interface, the most common use is to translate between private and public IP addresses. Every node or device on a TCP/IP network needs to have a unique IP address. This includes the internet, and if every single PC, laptop, mobile phone, smart home device, etc. had its own unique address, there wouldn't be enough to go round. The Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN, is the body responsible for allocating public IP addresses. They have also designated ranges of addresses for private use. Private addresses will never be allocated as public addresses, but there can be multiple instances of the same private IP address across the world. For example, let's take a business with 50 connected devices. They have chosen to use the IP addresses 192.168.1.100 through to 192.168.1.149, so that each device has a unique IP address on their local area network, or LAN. There is nothing to stop the business next door from implementing the same scheme. Whilst every address is unique on each office LAN, these two networks could not be joined, as it would result in duplicate IP addresses. Each office is also connected to the internet. For this connection, the IP address for each facility has to be unique, i.e. the wide area network, WAN, will be assigned a public IP address. NAT is used to translate public IP addresses to private IP addresses and vice versa, so that the LAN devices can communicate across the WAN. There are three categories of network address translation: static, dynamic, and port address translation, PAT. Most commonly, we see PAT, which is also known as NAT overload, but let's take a look at the other two categories first. Static NAT is used to translate one public IP address to one private IP address. An example of where this might be used is when hosting a web server. The web server may be a machine on the LAN with a private IP address, but it needs to be accessible from the internet. By mapping a static public IP address to the private IP address, requests can be made from the WAN and will be properly routed. Using NAT for this, rather than a fixed server IP address, provides greater flexibility when administering the network. Dynamic NAT uses a pool of public IP addresses, which are leased to private client machines. A public IP address will be mapped to a private IP address for the duration of the session and then returned to the pool. This type of NAT is used where the maximum number of users is known and public IP addresses are required for the exchange of information. Most commonly though, we see NAT used to map multiple private IP addresses to a single public IP address. This is known as port address translation, or PAT, and is the method used to connect most homes and small business networks to the internet. When using the TCP/IP protocol, IP addresses are appended with additional information which is not normally visible to us. Significantly for NAT is an IP port number. IP ports are numbered from 0 to 65,535 and are the mechanism where we can use multiple applications on a single network interface. When a request is made with a web browser, for example, your device will append a port number to the request so that when the information is returned, it is directed to your web browser and not your email application. NAT uses this system to ensure that traffic on the WAN is properly routed to LAN clients. Let's look at an example. We have two LAN devices, or clients, one with the IP address 192.168.1.100, which has requested the web page at www.novuscontrols.co.uk, and the other with the IP address 192.168.1.120, which has requested the web page at www.bcia.co.uk. They share an internet connection with a single public IP address of 87.24.12.134. When a request from client 1 is passed to the router will pass the request to the internet, changing the IP address to the public one, but also appending a port number. The full address of the request might therefore be something like 87.24.12.134 and port number 49154. The request from the second client would be appended with a different port number, so it might be 87.24.12.134, but this time with port number 49155. When the web pages are returned to the router, the original request IP address and port number are included in the message. The router can then use the requesting port number to route the traffic to the correct private IP address on the LAN. The correct web page is then delivered to each of the client machines. Of the three types of NAT, port address translation is the most common, as this is used for almost all home and small business internet access, along with communications across GSM networks. Even with the extended capabilities of IPv6, it is still impractical to allocate unique IP addresses to every single device on the internet. NAT, therefore, continues to play an important role in routing traffic between private and public networks.